The dust of Kabul clung to everything, a perpetual reminder of a world constantly shifting beneath Rahim Jalal's feet. At 15, Rahim carried the weight of years that weren't his own, a lifetime of distant explosions, hushed whispers of danger, and the ghost of a peace he'd only heard about in his grandfather's stories. His village, a cluster of sun-baked mud-brick homes just outside the city's sprawl, bore the scars of conflict like an old man's face. Crumbling walls, skeletal remains of once proud buildings, and the ever-present drone of distant machinery that could be construction, or something far worse. Yet, even in the desolation, life stubbornly persisted. Children chased stray dogs down narrow alleys, their laughter surprisingly bright. Women bartered apricots in the market, their voices a melodic counterpoint to the city's harsh rhythm. And Rahim, with his thoughtful eyes and lean frame, found his own quiet battles to fight. Battles against despair, against the creeping grayness that threatened to swallow all color. He understood the practicality of survival. He helped his mother at the small family stall, selling dried fruits and nuts. He learned to distinguish the sound of a transport helicopter from a military one. He knew which routes were safer and when to keep his head down. But there was a part of him, a stubborn ember, that yearned for something more. Something that could puncture the heavy blanket of fear. One sweltering afternoon, while rummaging through the collapsed remains of what used to be his grandfather's weaving workshop, a place full of forgotten treasures, Rahim found it. Tucked beneath a broken loom, a shard of vibrant crimson silk. Not much, barely a palm's width, but the color was so intense, so alive, it felt like a jolt. He held it up, watching the light refract through its ancient threads. He remembered his grandfather, a man of booming laughter and calloused hands, telling stories of kite fighting, of brave warrior kites soaring high above the orchards, their strings coated with crushed glass, battling for supremacy. He remembered the festivals, the sky alive with a riot of paper and bamboo dreams. His grandfather called them messengers of the sky. The crimson silk sparked an idea, faint at first, then growing with fierce conviction. Not just a kite, but a message. A message that wasn't whispered in fear, but shouted in color against the vast, indifferent sky. A message of peace. Rahim knew it wouldn't be easy. Materials were scarce. The adults, wearied by endless struggle, might see it as a foolish distraction, or worse, a dangerous provocation. But the memory of the silk, the sheer, audacious color, burned away his hesitation. His journey began with scavenged materials. He found thin bamboo sticks, surprisingly resilient, from a fallen reed fence near the riverbed. For paper, he used old newspapers and discarded flour sacks, their rough texture a challenge to his youthful ingenuity. Glue was a precious commodity, but his mother, noticing his intense focus, offered a small pot of homemade paste, made from flour and water. She watched him, a silent question in her eyes, but said nothing. Perhaps she saw a flicker of her own lost dreams in his determined gaze. His first confidant was Omar, a year older, with a perpetual scowl that masked a sharp mind and even sharper hands. Omar excelled at fixing things, at making something out of nothing. Rahim found him polishing a rusty bicycle chain by the community well. "Omar," Rahim began, his voice low, "I'm making a kite." Omar snorted, wiping grease on his worn trousers. "A kite? For what? To impress the dust." "No. To fly. With a message." Rahim pulled out the crimson silk, showing it to Omar. "My grandfather used to say they were messengers." Omar stared at the silk, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. "Messages for who?" "The war drones." His cynicism was a heavy shield he wore, but Rahim saw the way his fingers, usually so quick, hesitated, almost reaching for the fabric. "For anyone who sees it," Rahim insisted. "For us. To remember what peace looks like." Omar squinted at him, but then a slow smile, a rare event, touched his lips. "You think a piece of paper in the sky will stop the bombs?" "No," Rahim admitted, But it will show that we still remember what peace is. That we still want it. To Rahim's surprise, Omar didn't ridicule him further. Instead, he reached for a thin bamboo stick. This needs to be straighter. And the binding, you'll need stronger twine. And just like that, Omar was in. His hands, precise and nimble, became invaluable. He found stronger twine by unraveling an old fishing net and expertly lashed the bamboo frame together. He showed Rahim how to get the balance right, how to ensure the wind would catch it just so. His cynicism remained, but it was now laced with an odd, almost protective, enthusiasm. Their workshop became a hidden corner behind Rahim's house, shielded by a crumbling wall and a fragrant jasmine bush. It was there they met Bidar. Bidar was 8, a slip of a girl with eyes like polished dates and a spirit that defied the constant shadow of fear. She'd lost her parents in a market bombing 2 years prior, and now lived with her aunt. Bidar often collected colorful scraps of fabric and discarded beads, seeing beauty where others saw only refuse. She stumbled upon Rahim and Omar one afternoon, drawn in by the whisper of their focused activity. "What are you making?" she asked, her voice a soft chirp. Omar, startled, almost dropped a sharpened stick. Rahim held up the half-finished kite frame, now resembling a skeletal bird. "A kite," Rahim said. "For flying." Bidar's eyes widened. "Like the ones in the stories? The ones that dance with the clouds?" She clapped her hands, a sound so pure it made Omar flinch. "Can I help?" Rahim hesitated, looking at Omar. Omar grunted, but didn't object. There was something about Bidar's unadulterated joy that was infectious. "We're putting messages on them," Rahim told her, showing her the rough paper they were using. Bidar's face lit up. "Messages? What kind of messages?" "Of peace," Rahim said. "Of what we want." Bidar bit her lip thoughtfully, then pulled a small, brightly colored piece of fabric from her pocket, a scrap of turquoise from an old sari. "What about no more sad goodbyes?" she suggested, her voice barely a whisper. Her own sad goodbyes were a constant ache. Rahim felt a lump in his throat. It was perfect. More than peace, it was the specific, aching desire that pulsed through their lives. That day, the Peace Kite project officially began. Rahim, Omar, and Bidar became a secret society, bound by bamboo, paper, and a shared, desperate hope. They wrote their messages carefully, in Dari and Pashto, sometimes translating them into English for anyone who might see them from above. "Bring back our laughter." Bidar's idea, written in wobbly script. "Safe schools for all children." Omar, surprisingly passionate about this. "Our homes rebuilt, our families together." Rahim, remembering his grandfather's workshop. "The scent of jasmine, not smoke." "Children should only fly kites, not flee." Bidar, with her artistic flair, insisted on decorating the kites. She collected flower petals to press onto the paper, found discarded beads to glue along the edges, and even used colored chalk from the blackboard of the ruined schoolhouse to draw miniature doves and olive branches. The kites became tapestries of hope, each one a testament to their resilience. They made 3, then 5, then 8, each one distinct, each one a labor of love and defiance. One afternoon, as they were carefully applying the last paper panel to a kite shaped like a soaring hawk, a sudden, sharp crack echoed from the distance. The familiar sound made them all freeze, their hands suspended in midair. Omar instinctively pulled Bidar behind the wall, his face grim. Rahim felt his heart pounding against his ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Another crack, closer this time, followed by the rumble of a heavy vehicle. A patrol was passing nearby. They crouched silent, their carefully crafted symbols of peace hidden from the harsh reality outside. When the sounds faded, Omar let out a shaky breath. "This is dangerous, Rahim," he whispered, his usual bravado gone. "What if they see us?" Rahim looked at the unfinished kite, then at Bidar's small, determined face, streaked with dust and a smudge of blue chalk. "We have to try, Omar," he said, his voice firm. If we don't, then they truly win. Omar swallowed, then slowly picked up the kite and returned to work. The fear was real, but so was the longing. The day they chose was a Tuesday. The sky was a vast, unbroken expanse of cornflower blue, and the wind, a gentle, steady presence, seemed to carry a promise. They picked a spot on the outskirts of the village, a small rise overlooking a dry riverbed, where the ruins were denser and provided some cover. They gathered their finished kites, now a vibrant kaleidoscope of colors. Reds, blues, yellows, greens, each one adorned with carefully penned messages and Bidar's artistic flourishes. They weren't alone. Word had, inevitably, leaked out. A handful of younger children, wide-eyed and silent, had followed them, drawn by the forbidden excitement. They huddled together, a small, defiant cluster of hope against the backdrop of a broken world. Rahim took the first kite, a magnificent red and gold square adorned with the message, "May our children know only gardens, not graves." He held it aloft, feeling the wind tug at its frame. Omar, usually stoic, gave him a small, encouraging nod. Bidar, her face alight with a mixture of awe and anticipation, clutched the string for another kite, her small hand trembling. Rahim ran, the kite fluttering uncertainly behind him, then catching the wind with a joyous sweep. It soared, climbing higher and higher, a crimson splash against the azure. He released more string, watching it dance, a vibrant beacon. "It's flying!" Bidar shrieked, her voice a pure bell of happiness. Omar took the next kite, a blue one with drawings of textbooks and pencils, and with a surprisingly graceful movement, launched it into the sky. Then Bidar, with a fierce determination, sent her little green kite, adorned with a tiny drawn heart and the words, "No more sad goodbyes," spiraling upwards. Soon, the sky above their war-scarred village was dotted with a dozen colorful kites, each carrying a silent plea, a whispered dream. The children below watched, mesmerized, their faces upturned, tracing the arcs of hope against the endless blue. For a few precious moments, the world shrank to the sky and these colorful messengers. The distant rumble of traffic, the constant anxiety, faded into the background. Then, a low, ominous thrumming grew louder. A military helicopter, dark and imposing, appeared on the horizon, heading straight towards them. Panic rippled through the small group. Rahim's stomach lurched. His hands tightened on the string, tempted to pull his kite down, to hide. The helicopter drew closer, its rotors churning the air into a violent vortex. He could almost make out the figures inside. They had been seen. Omar, seeing the fear in Rahim's eyes, stepped forward. "No!" he shouted over the din, "let them fly. Let them see." His voice was defiant, courageous. Bidar, though trembling, didn't pull her kite down. She just stared up at her small green heart, soaring valiantly. The helicopter hovered directly above them, so close they could feel the pressure of the air, the roar of the engine. Rahim braced himself for the shouts, the commands, the inevitable end to their beautiful, fragile act of rebellion. But then, something unexpected happened. The helicopter didn't descend. It didn't fire. It simply hovered for a long, agonizing moment, its dark silhouette a stark contrast to the bright kites dancing below. And then, slowly, deliberately, it turned. It flew away, receding into the distance, leaving only the sound of the wind and the gentle rustle of a dozen kite strings. Silence enveloped them. The children looked at each other, then back at the receding helicopter, then up at their unwavering kites. Had they been seen? Had their messages been read? They couldn't know. But as the last echoes of the rotors faded, a different sound filled the air. Laughter. Not the wild joy of a children's game, but a softer, more profound sound. A sound of relief, of defiant triumph. Rahim lowered his gaze from the sky to the faces of the children around him. Their eyes, though still shadowed by their reality, held a new light. A spark. They hadn't stopped the war. They hadn't brought instant peace. But they had done something equally powerful. They had reclaimed a piece of their sky. They had spoken. As the sun began to dip, painting the horizon in hues of orange and purple, they slowly reeled in their kites. The messages, though still visible on the paper, now felt etched onto their hearts. Did they see Rahim? Bidar asked, her little hand still stroking the green kite. Rahim smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. Maybe not all of them, Bidar, he said, gently taking her hand. But we saw. And we remembered. And that is enough. Omar, meanwhile, was already examining one of the kite frames, his brow furrowed in thought. Next time, he muttered, more to himself than to them, we'll need brighter paper. And maybe a longer tail for stability. Rahim laughed, a warm, resonant sound. The grayness hadn't disappeared, but it had been pierced. The seeds of hope, carried on the gentle wind, had found a new place to land. And in the heart of a war-torn land, a handful of children had dared to dream in color, sending their silent, soaring messages of peace, one kite at a time, into the vast, indifferent, but not entirely unseeing, sky. The war might rage on, but their spirits, like the kites they flew, would continue to rise. That will be all for today. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification button. Goodbye.